Okay, first of all, yes, my beard is gone. Let's not dwell on it, okay? Vibrato. Vibrato is a musical effect that most instruments are able to produce through the player's physical technique. The vibrato effect seeks to emulate the adult singing voice. It occurs in singing through variations in the larynx. It can be spontaneous, but professional singers, depending on their training, are able to control it. And of course, so are instrumentalists. First of all, what is it? Vibrato is an Italian word, and it basically means to vibrate. The effect consists of a regular, slight changing of pitch. And there are only two components that determine the outcome: how much the pitch is varied, and the speed at which it's varied. And what you hear just sounds like a vibration or a wavering. And you, dear guitarist, are probably doing it wrong. I know, that's an audacious clickbait claim. Maybe you're not doing it wrong, but when was the last time you really gave any thought to your vibrato technique? I mean, it's admittedly not something I think much about either, but I've had bad vibrato habits pointed out by a former teacher of mine, and it just stuck with me, so I'm passing it on. The problem is that many musicians, not even just guitarists, don't give any thought or intention to vibrato. It's just something you do because it's expressive. And when you're caught up in the music, it just comes out. If you don't believe me, pick up your guitar, noodle around a little in a pentatonic scale or something, and don't play any vibrato at all. You might be surprised at how difficult that is. You might have to exercise a bit of restraint. You should strive for everything you do in your playing to be intentional. Happy accidents happen when you're caught up in the moment, but I sure don't want to rely on them. So that's one thing, just being intentional about it. But the other thing is controlling it on a technical level. On the guitar and other stringed instruments, vibrato is produced by gently pushing and pulling on the string with your left hand while sustaining a note. Pushing towards you slightly reduces the tension on the vibrating portion of the string, thus lowering the pitch. Pulling away slightly increases the tension, raising the pitch. So what I'm doing here is a lateral pushing and pulling. Sometimes I see people go against the grain, so to speak, and produce a vibrato by slightly bending the string. The downside is that you can only raise the pitch by bending the string. You can't lower it. And then you can also just press harder to make the string make contact with the wood, which it should not normally do. If you do that when you're playing normally, you're squeezing too hard. But again, with this, you can only raise the pitch. You can't lower it. And that brings me to my main point, pitch perception. When you're using vibrato, you're slightly changing the pitch of a sustained note. Because of that, you can run into tuning issues if you're not careful, as in the sustained note can sound out of tune. This isn't a good real-world example, but listen to what happens if I apply the squeezing method to the fretted notes of an open position E major chord. Sounds terrible. You can hear the beating start to happen as the fretted notes clash with the open strings. Now, there have been studies on how vibrato affects pitch perception, but there doesn't seem to be an overwhelming consensus on this. However, my former teacher pointed out to me that when you apply vibrato to a note, the perceived pitch for the listener is the upper limit of the little range you're modulating within. You're perceiving the top end as the pitch you're hearing. So if you're pulling on the string and slightly raising the pitch, that note may sound too sharp or out of tune. Whereas if you push the string towards the bridge and don't pull back towards the headstock at all, the perceived pitch is more likely to be in tune. So what am I implying here? Should you never bend, squeeze, or pull on the strings? That's not really what I'm saying, but you should be aware that if you get really carried away and you're playing without intention, you might sound out of tune. But also realize the style of music plays into this as well. If you're playing the blues, getting more raucous with your vibrato is totally stylistically appropriate. The blues is full of this deep-seated energy that just wants to burst out. And as a style, it's not so much about technical precision as it is conveying intense emotion. And it's full of these little microtonal bends anyway, so yeah, you can go a little off the rails with your vibrato. Now, if you're playing something like Bach, you have to be a little more focused in how you're using vibrato, because if you start throwing in this really raucous stuff, it's going to sound pretty out of place. You see what I mean? When I play that for real, I actually apply very little vibrato. Really, it might be more appropriate to use none at all in that passage. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that you should always think about how best to serve the music you're playing. Try to think about your vibrato more. Be intentional about it. Placing it on key notes can have a subtly powerful effect, and the effect depends on how you use it. As I say, know what's possible, but let your ears guide you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.